Welcome back to another episode of the Start a Glamping Business podcast by Glampitects. And we're here for another monthly special episode, and that's me for the co-host, Connor Schwab with Sage Outdoor Advisory. And of course, the tried and true Nick Perslow is here as well. And today we have our special guests, which is Columbia Gorge Getaway, and two of the founders, Rob and Carolyn Sourek, are here. And we're really excited to dive into this episode. It holds a close place in my heart. I grew up near Portland, Oregon, and this is right outside in the Columbia River Gorge, which has got to be one of the most stunning places in the country. And they have a really special 400-acre mountainous wooded piece of land that they're in the middle of developing on. And then this was also one of the first feasibility studies that I did when I started at Sage Outdoor Advisory. And Carolyn went to my alma mater, same university as me, Santa Clara. We were both engineers there, actually. So it's a fun and special project. So let's go ahead and dive in, I guess. Before we get into your guys' personal stories, do you want to just give us a little bit of an overview of kind of the property and the offering at Columbia Gorge Getaways, kind of what's there to paint a picture, and then we'll dive into kind of each of your stories and how you got into this?
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for the intro, Connor. Yeah, Columbia Gorge Getaways, like you said, is it's a glamping resort on 400 acres. We have yurts, bell tents, safari tents, campsites. A little bit of background about it is it was a timber stand that we actually purchased from Weyerhaeuser, which was then before owned by Longview Fiber. And originally when it was purchased, there wasn't a desire to do much more than just have a big, beautiful piece of land. And a little bit more discovery really yielded that glamping was something that we wanted to be a part of. And everything from glamping to events to things like that is we're really still developing, a lot of the processes, but it's been a lot of fun. And
well, really, we're building it in phases. So right now, yeah. Connor, as you came out and visited, we came up with the idea a few years ago, and it's been really important for us to kind of touch every surface and be part of the entire development of the property. So initially, our ideas were, hey, what about yurts, bell tents, and campsites? And so to start off, we did some campsites and we did some bell tents. That will morph, and so this next year the offerings will be a little bit different. This next year the offerings will be yurts, bell tents, and campsites. And then in future phases, we intend to only offer the bell tents on request and transfer instead into a more 3-season type of unit, safari tents. So offerings around the property is really anything from hiking to foraging to enjoying the creek, just nature bathing in general. There's some really beautiful gathering spaces that have been developed. So that's kind of a big part of it. We built a log yard, playfully. It's like a big kid playground in essence. And so that's kind of a fun offering that we've shared with folks in the last year. But in the future, we do plan on expanding the trail system. Currently, there's just a number of old logging roads, so it's really easy to walk side by side with your people that have gone with you or your dog. There's also more typical trails where you're in the woods, but expansive views, close quarter forest experiences. So there's kind of something for everybody, but.
And Carolyn, you mentioned the phase approach. It's something that I have conversations with a fair amount of people who are looking to do similar, where obviously glamping can come with reasonably high, well, not relatively, it's still low development costs, but if you're buying year-round units, the cost can get high for development. So some people they think, okay, well, maybe for one season we'll do the bell tents and the camping, and then that will give us the capital to allow for the rest of the build. Was that kind of the plan, and has that gone to plan for you guys with that first phase?
Yeah, what's so interesting, when we started working with Connor and Sage, we knew we wanted to have a range of offerings to be able to provide folks with a range of accommodation or amenity type needs and backgrounds, experience levels to be able to experience the woods. And so we started out with yurts, bell tents, and campsites. And so that's kind of what Connor was, worked with us on. And we really had like phase 1 and then phase 2, but phase 2 just involved more of them. So our phase approach has really morphed into phase 1 now has A, B, and C. And what we learned in A has really transferred into what we're doing, for B and C. Part of that is things that we learned at the American Glamping Association conference. Preferences, guest preferences have been able to let us, or we've used information that we've gathered in phase 1A to further develop B and C before we even get to the phase 2 that we worked on together, Connor.
Perfect. Well, I was going to say we could definitely dive into those details in just a moment. Wanted to get a little bit of kind of the background story on each of you. What were you doing professionally before this, and how did you, get into glamping and find the land?
So my background actually is I came onto the project about a year after it was already started. My background is I went to Western Washington University and I have a degree in ecotourism. And right out of school, I was picked up by a ultra luxury hospitality brand called the Amon Group. They have properties in Arizona, well, actually Utah, Jackson Hole. They have 2 in the U.S. and then mostly all throughout the world, mostly in Southeast Asia. And most recently, I was working at the property in southern Utah and helping kind of develop them a little bit down there. I was the activities director, and then popped all over. I was in Bend for a little bit. I was in the Teton Valley. I was in Jackson Hole for a while. And when these guys were working on the project, I was always kind of checking with the family and just, once a month you call and you catch up and hearing about everything they were doing. It was just so exciting. It was so cool. And whenever I could give a hand, I would. And then eventually kind of hit a critical mass where I'm like, this is just too much fun. I can't miss out on this. And so left my job at Grand Targhee Ski Resort as the guest services director, and then came down here and have just been, mostly working on kind of like the back end, like setting up reservations and marketing and everything like that. And then when I can, helping out in the field and building and things like that.
Rob actually also purchased a Wood-Mizer mill, and so he's been our millwright, doing a lot of it's a timber property, right? And we have to clear land in order to build, and so we've been able to utilize those trees which we're not able to transplant. Rob's been then milling, and so we've been able to use the material from the property to build some of the sites that we're going to talk about later. But he was kind of really a missing link, so just kind of to step before him. My background is civil engineering, but that's very broad. So more specifically, construction and infrastructure. So I currently work as a public works director for the city of Stevenson. And it's funny because I feel like the two go so well together because Columbia Gorge Getaways has all the same pieces, and folks' glamping resorts still have all those same pieces. Where do we get our water? How do we deal with sanitation? How do people access their different units? What do we do for air quality? How do we deal with environmental? Is there a geological component to this? They fit really nicely. So my background's been great as far as the building, the site planning, the engineering, the working with the consultants. And then my partner Mitch is his background is in construction, so the man can build anything. Just give him a saw and an idea. And so that's been great. He also has a huge love for nature and an appreciation. My dad, who's kind of the fourth cog in this machine, or the wheel on this train, or out of control car, is a forester by background. So and also a business owner. So he is able to provide that sort of perspective to the group. So we all bring a little bit of something different, but
yeah, we're going to go into the development kind of phase in a second, and I'm sure Connor will want to touch upon the kind of how the civil engineering degree kind of helped with that. I do just want to ask you, Rob, because I know you mentioned there that you work for the Amman Group, and sound like you're on the Amangiri project in Utah, which for those who don't know is kind of the kind of, I would say it's the kind of pinnacle of luxury for, if you call it a glamping site in North America. It's you've got the rumors are that people like Kim Kardashian and Leonardo DiCaprio stayed there and played and things like that. So it's that level of luxury. And I'm interested in knowing if there's anything you picked up from those experiences working on those sites where presumably you're working with like kind of top-notch operators. Anything that you learned from that you brought to this project?
Yeah. I mean, I think so I was with Amman Group for almost a decade, between 3 different properties. And I think what I found, so I think what you're referring to is Camp Sourek. That was their latest glamping install. I think that went in maybe about 5 years ago. And I mean, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek glamping. I mean, they're all stick-built structures covered in canvas with, in-floor heat and forced air, which, it's got the luxuries of a home, with the exterior that looks like a tent. But I think the biggest thing, Nick, that I learned from the time there is like, you can deliver 5-star luxury service to guests without needing to pay 5-star luxury prices. You just have to train yourself and train your staff to really care. A big kind of mantra that we use down there is whenever someone came to visit, or I guess whenever a guest came, I would always tell my staff, like, pretend like this is your friend. Pretend like this is your family coming to visit you. And, it's like, if Connor comes up and visits and I'm like, buddy, I know you love to mountain bike, and we have these great mountain bike, trails that I can go put you on. And you know what, Nick, I know that, you enjoy bird watching. And so like,
big birder.
Wrong.
Something like that. But it's really to just take that extra step, as opposed to, I have a script of activities, I have a script of things that I think are going to interest you, to actually take the time to like talk to you. And I think by that example, Nick, we realize I don't know anything about you, whether or not you like to birdwatch, but, let's say hypothetically, if you were one of my clients, I would give you a call and we'd talk. And normally I'd be talking to your assistant or your travel agent, but I'd get a feel for how we can do a really good job and be having that intuitive service. And, we kind of go back and forth internally is like, what level of service are we going to be able to offer? And what are we trying to accomplish? And the biggest thing is just to be like, yeah, like Carolyn brought up in a meeting on Wednesday where she was like, let's give people every opportunity to explore the outdoors. So let's put galoshes and rain jackets in all the units. And just in case somebody forgets theirs. And, and it sometimes happens in meetings where we have disagreements. And I was like, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I'm like, how are we going to know sizes? How are we going to know quality? What if they go disappearing? And ultimately it was like, that doesn't matter. What matters is that somebody walks in and they see these intuitive touches. And so that's kind of, I think, a long answer to a short question, like just the intuitive service. And that's something that you see at the Four Seasons, you see at the Ritz, you see at the Ammans, that kind of get missed in the, mid to low hospitality. And it's not hard to do it. You just have to kind of program your brain.
Very cool. And I love that. I love we're growing up in Portland. I know how much it rains, so having a rain jacket and some boots, that's a good call. And you said your role at the Amman Group was director of guest services. Was that at the ski resort?
That was at Grand Targhee Ski Resort. Okay. With Amman, I was the activities director.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it was basically a concierge, but a high-level concierge offerings. My team was, about 7 people, and a lot of it was just like we talked, that, intuitive calling in advance and things.
Hi everyone, Nick from Glamping North America here, and I've just got a very quick message to announce some extremely exciting news. Since launching in July 2022, Glamping North America has made a name for itself in the North American glamping industry. We've consulted on over 40 glamping projects, accumulated over 47,000 podcast downloads and plays, and we're now ready to take the next step. And with that, we're absolutely delighted to announce that we're beginning the process of developing our own glamping projects. We want you to be involved. There are more details to come, but for now we're taking expressions of interest from prospective investors. We're so excited to get this going. It's been a long time coming and we can't wait to get you involved. So all you have to do is fill out the form in the description of this episode and we'll be in touch with more information very soon. We can't wait to hear from you and we'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.
Were you on site down in Utah?
I was, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's super interesting. Well, maybe we'll circle back and talk a little bit more about that. But
Yeah.
well, you guys, I love the 4 people on your team have such different skills, and they're all the skills that you need to run a glamping business successfully. So super rare. I don't know how your family pulled that one off, but good work. And
really
diving into
like a plumber, so like Rob just needs to like marry a plumber, and then we're set.
All right, you got it, Rob. Get on Plumbers R Us dating app. Okay, awesome. So I want to dive into how you guys found the property. What made you choose this? Was there a criteria you were looking at? What was the status of the utilities? How did your civil background help? Just love to dive into that part.
Yeah, we feel extremely fortunate. Rob and I both grew up in Carson, Washington, and actually a stone's throw from the property that is in development. So part of that 400 acres is actually 20 acres that our mom gifted to us, and 20 acres that contains our family home. So when it became available, my dad, the forester, was like, hey, like, I love a forest. I wonder what could happen if I actually was able to care for one all on my own. And so he was able to purchase, he was sunsetting a different company. And so he was able to make an investment in the property that was right next door. So that was kind of how it came about. And then from there, this is sitting vacant. There were people, so it's got a green gate, right? An old U.S. Forest Service green gate is across the across the access road, the main access road. And I can't tell you how many people, talking to them, they're like, oh yes, we went hunting up there. Like, oh yeah, like we went foraging up there. The whole of Stevenson, Carson population has done something up on this property just because it's so beautiful, and it was very accessible to the public, and it still will be today. But part of what comes to a large forest property with no oversight is illegal burning, illegal dumping. There just wasn't. We realized shortly after obtaining the property or acquiring the property that it would need to be managed, and so then what came up was how. Mitch and I have plans to build a home for our family. We have 2 young daughters on the property as well, and just kind of thought, what a great space. Like, we love like bringing family and friends out here, doing campfires, camping in different spaces. Not everybody gets this kind of access. Like, how can we give this access to people who don't have it? I mean, the concrete jungle of Portland Metro is just expanding, as is the one in Seattle. And people just don't get access to these kinds of spaces. So for us, a huge driving force is like, hey, this is what timberland looks like. This is what different ages of stands look like. So that was kind of a real driver for us.
Yeah, and to build on that a little bit, I don't remember if we talked about this at all when we were working with you guys, but just for the listeners, like being able to tell a story, having your hospitality experience and the story of your property, having a story behind it is so powerful in connecting guests with the land and wanting to come back or share it. And I think your property is so well set up for this. I mean, the fact that you guys grew up a stone's throw from it, your dad, worked in the timber industry. For those who don't know, like, the Portland soccer team's called the Portland Timbers. The coffee's called Stumptown. Like, the whole town is known for its like forestry and timber industry. So being able to tie that in, and now you have this amazing playground that you guys built out of timber from your mill on the property. So it's a really cool story that I think really brings in the guests. And I would just encourage other listeners to try to tap into and find things like that as well. Obviously it's not gonna be the same type of scenario, but something to tap into.
Yeah, Connor, to that point, I don't want to digress too much, but like when we're like excavating, we're finding like old chokers from like when they used to like skid logs, like on big like steel cables. We're finding like insulators for communication lines that they used to run like up and down the line so they could talk to one another when they're like yarding and felling trees. Like, we keep finding all these little treasures out there, like old saw blades and stuff like that. And we're making sure to like kind of keep them, because again, that's a big part of what we want to do, is we want to tell that story, tell about the timber industry, because it's like teeming with that, and you're really immersed in it when you stay with us.
This is where your house comes from. Nobody knows that. Like, this is where your house comes from.
Yeah, it's your own archaeological site. I'd love to know, you know, when I'm talking with people that we consult with, or people who are looking for property, I always say the first thing you do when you find a property is you look at the zoning to see if you can do what you do, and then you look at the utilities to find out if they're available or what you're going to need to do to solve the utility problem. So what were those two, how did the process go for those two things on your guys' property?
They take so much longer than anyone ever expects. Even with a founding member being a civil engineer, used to navigating those channels, like it takes a long time. Even if it is not necessarily an approved use, but a conditional use, that comes with strings, and that comes with conversations, and making sure to invest in the right places and not invest too early before you understand the requirements of your conditional use permitting process, and is important. It's so easy to want to skip over that and go straight to like picking out your unit type, because that's like the fun and sexy part, or what kind of sheet, thread count do I want, and what kind of dishes do I want to have in my unit. But that is such a, you first have to find out whether your neighbors are going to be upset about the noise or be upset about the traffic. And sometimes they're going to be both, and you kind of have to navigate that first before getting into that. So kind of big picture advice would be, start conceptual level, find someone who can draw you a plan with a dream. Think about how your neighbors are going to feel about it. Reach out to them in advance, and be sure to have your ducks in a row when you go into those public hearings, or the counties or cities, or whoever you're going to. They have a planning department, and if your type of project is within their strategic plan, or it's part of a goal, or if it is a revenue stream that they're interested in exploring, like they will help you. Like they will help you figure out how to navigate their process. Again, that can be lengthy, so patience is huge. Like, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Yeah. And we tell ourselves that like every day. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So that's kind of the, at least from that was more the permitting, process, conditional use permitting process. Utilities are another huge question. And that's without even like diving into like environmental concerns, because there will be cultural, there will be environmental, there will be geological things that you want, and water, like all those, like you will have to do some sort of SEPA analysis and really quantify all the potential impacts of your project. Again, your planner should be able to help you with that, but where will you get your water? How will you clean it? Do you need to clean it? You don't know yet because you haven't drilled your well. Like, is surface water okay? How much can you pull out? How much will you need? Like, these are all questions that a land development consultant can help you kind of work through. And again, like, try to stay conceptual level as much as possible. Like, big round numbers, you'll have plenty of time to dive into details, but as you're kind of dealing with feasibility, you want to stay as high level as possible. How many people kind of win? You will have to make some assumptions, and it's okay to change them, but be comfortable with that.
Hi friends, this is your host, Connor Schwab at Sage Outdoor Advisory. If you're launching an outdoor hospitality project like glamping, then we can help. At Sage, we offer feasibility studies and appraisals. Essentially what that means is we look at the market and your proposed business offering and do an in-depth analysis and financial projections to make sure that your business is profitable. This is something that's very helpful to know before you spend all of your time and resources launching. This is also particularly helpful if you're going to be raising money from a bank or private investors to capitalize your project. They're going to want to see this type of in-depth analysis from an independent third-party specialist. We've done over 250 projects across the US in the last 4 years, so we know what it takes to take a project from concept to reality. If this sounds like something that would be helpful to you, you can go to our website, sageoutdooradvisory.com, and you can schedule a complimentary intro call with one of our specialists. Thanks.
Yeah, on the permitting front in general, obviously some people go through like a 2-year process where they're battling with the neighbours, and there's Facebook groups popped up in opposition.
Oh, yeah.
Others have a 2-month breeze and everything goes completely smoothly. So how was your experience in terms of both timelines and general levels of frustration, exhaustion, difficulties?
Yeah, we're probably in the middle. Fortunately, Rob didn't have to deal too much with this because that's the first thing you do is make sure that you can do the project you want to do. But we did not do a good job about, full disclosure, we did not do a good job of outreaching to our neighbors. We assumed since it was 400 acres and no one was ever going to see any of the units that the neighbors wouldn't feel impacted and they wouldn't care. But we were wrong. They did care. They cared a lot. And so there was additional time in that permitting process, and there were additional conditions that we didn't anticipate that were required of us. So how painful was it? On a scale from 1 to 10, I don't know, it was 6, 7. I
think the best advice too for most people out there, most listeners, is when you want to do it, get ahead of the message, talk to the neighbors, get things out there. One thing that we got, and was a challenge of ours, was that the rumor mill started going, and by the time we realized it was happening, we were already in the way back, and so it was being more reactive than proactive. And so I think the best thing to do is when you find the land, when something you want to do, and you kind of start putting things together, instantly start talking to the community, instantly start talking to the neighbors, and say this is what we want to do. We, at one point, once when we had everything launched, we had all of our neighbors out, to come see the property. We had a big launch, and we had music, and we had food, and it was a lot of fun. And kind of the consensus from our community, our proximal community, was well, where's the giant swimming pool? Well, where's the 500-room hotel? Well, where's, it's that's not the message we put out. But unfortunately, it was the message that got put out that we had to kind of backtrack and correct, when we shouldn't have ever had to do that. And just good, marketing to our community would have been the best way to go.
It's a great point, and we hear that all the time, and getting in front of it, speaking with your neighbors, trying to control the messaging, being proactive. When you had to do some sort of concessions for your conditional use permits, could you give a couple examples of what that looked like and how that might have impacted your plan or your operations?
Yeah, I know one we were just kind of disappointed about, but we probably shouldn't have expected it, was we have a closing time of 10 p.m. They also controlled how many people we have come on site. So yeah, we were expecting to be able to do a little bit bigger, or at least have the ability to. I don't know that anyone wants to, but you never like to hear your events can only be 120 people. That's as much, or maybe it's 150. But we were planning for 120, but then they say only 150, and you're oh well, okay, darn it. If we would have had an ability, or if someone would have been interested in doing something a little bit larger, we now no longer have that ability, or, now you got to shut down by 10 p.m. and, make sure that you're shut down by 10 p.m. So I was well, that's unfortunate. We're so far from, the roadway, but because of the interest, we now have this 10 p.m. cutoff. It's that's as late as folks can.
Damn.
Those are a couple of kind of the bummer, the bummer deals. That doesn't mean that everyone has to go home, but any sort of event has to technically be over. It was really the events that was the most concerning to them. I don't think, had that not been part of the plan, I think that wouldn't have been an issue. I want to make sure to share with people, it's so intimidating to go knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, I'm considering buying this property and this is what I want to do with it. Here's a picture of my site plan. But instead, I think the approach is I'm considering doing this. What concerns do you have? Like, I see that this is a conditional use, so I do intend to pursue it, but I want to make sure that I pursue it in the least impactful way as possible. What parts of this plan concern you, so that when you know that stuff, then you can mitigate it. And so, you know, had we gotten in front of the noise thing, we could have taken the person who was concerned about noise up and said, okay, this is where the event space is. Do you see, you know, do you think if something was here, like, can we do some testing with you? Like, if I have my music on full here at the site, can you hear it down at the road? I mean, I feel like if those questions that dialogue would have occurred, maybe we wouldn't have, our 10 p.m. So.
How many neighbors are we talking about? Like, is it, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, is it just the neighbors that are touching the 400-acre properties? How many people would you have had to talk to? Like, if you're knowing what you know now, how many doors would you have needed to knock on?
So that is something that's somewhat interesting as well. So the county will have, like, different, or city, whoever, your jurisdiction is, they'll have different, like, reporting requirements for the public notices. So sometimes they're on, like, a radius, or sometimes they're, like, immediately adjacent, like touching the property. It kind of depends. But so ours was some radius. And so we didn't catch, so Bear Creek Road is this, it's basically a one way, even though it's not, it connects to a forest road. But so that radius didn't include everybody all the way down the one way. So the people outside of that distance didn't get a notice, and then they heard it from the people inside. And so that was a whole thing. So that added another month to the process, because they had to reissue all their notices now to everyone on Bear Creek Road. And we're not talking 100 people, or, we're not talking 100 homes. We're talking like 30 homes. So what's most interesting, or one of the things that I find most interesting, is when we grew up there was 8 homes. So, the NIMBY thing is real, and it's not always justified. So,
well, like Connor, when you came, it's like,
you passed 3.
Yeah, how many homes did you pass on the way? Like,
not much.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Not that you could really even see from the road. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell how all the proproperty's laid out, but yeah, it's pretty remote feeling.
Everyone
you don't need many to get the rumor mill started, though, eh? It's we've spoken to loads of people who have had all sorts of conspiracy theories thrown at them about what they're trying to do on this. It's crazy.
And one of the, I wanted to punctuate one of your points, Caroline, which I think is really good and should always be reiterated. Like, you probably shouldn't, to the listeners, you probably shouldn't go out and buy your units or like an events tent before you have your conditional use permit. Once because for exactly that example, like you might go out, be really excited about a wedding event venue tent, and you go buy that, and then you find out from the county that, oh, you actually can't do any events over 20 people, and then you just wasted all that money. So it is really important that you have that knowledge before you go out and make big purchases. Moving on, in terms of your guys, I guess in terms of what you guys have added to the site so far and what's there, and by the way, I have been to this site, and I've stayed in one of the glamping, the bell tents. It was lovely, and the property as a whole is super special. So I've been there, but I guess from your guys' perspective, now that you have built your property, is there any like lessons learned about what types of units or where, or the seasonality of the property and which unit types? And I guess, is there any big lessons learned about your site plan and how you guys have structured that, and amenities and things like that?
I think the one thing that I've thought was really interesting is that the easy thing to do, I think, would have been to make a much larger footprint for each of the units and the sites, so we can get machinery in there, so we're not, like ducking in and out of branches and things like that. And we actually did the opposite. We made everything as tight as we possibly could, and we never removed a tree or a bush or anything like that unless we absolutely had to. And because of that, we're not running into an issue with re-vegging. Like, the units go in, they're popped up, and there's trees around them, there's bushes around them. And so we haven't really been able to amend our site plan much, but with that, we haven't really had to amend much as far as the land goes. One thing that we bought early on was actually a tree spade. So instead of cutting down trees, we've been able to just transplant them. And so we're able to realize, like, hey, if we want a little bit more of a block from this road, or we want more trees between this site and this site, we're able to do it as opposed to like plant seeds and have that kind of instant wall up. And you'll notice when you're out on the property, you're like, wow, this actually works out perfectly the way the road winds around, this group of Doug fir. And that's not by accident. It's because we have the ability to do that.
So what I was going to call my glamping business when I was looking to start one was immersive nature hospitality, because I wanted you to truly be in it, like in the trees, in the foliage, next to the creek. And your guys' property, to your point, and it sounds like it was very intentional the way that you did this, the units are in it, like you have left the land so intact, and it is like it's an absolute forest bath in the truest sense of the word. So yeah, just to reiterate,
that's what we're shooting for.
And well, that very much sounds in line with the principles that you have on your website. So you have four pillars, of what you're trying to kind of maintain with the site. So you have conservation, education, relaxation, and celebration. And I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about those four pillars and how you kind of implement them day to day.
Conservation is kind of nuts and bolts, right? So we're using every tree we cut down. We're transplanting the ones that we can't use, or we're transplanting every one that we can. They get too big. Some of them are too big and you can't transplant them. So those are the ones we cut down and then we use as materials in our units. But we've got a very robust solar power system. So we didn't have any power on the site from the PUD as part of phase 1. Phase 2 will, but we intend to supplement with solar. And then if we can figure out how to do it, some micro hydro, there's a lot of elevation at this site, and there's also a lot of water. So the ability to have some sort of turbine that can generate power from water that was already going to be running downhill would be part of that. Roads are narrow, by design. You've said you have more than that, but that's kind of big stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came out and we kind of started, corporate Rob had his little hat on, and it was do we have a vision statement? Do we have a mission statement? Do we have our pillars? Let's go down this road. And as we started to do that, that's really where the 4 pillars came from. And the real desire of the property was, we want to work in concert with nature as opposed to in opposition with nature. And so we kind of have these pillars to sort of fall back on whenever we're going into a certain situation where we're okay, well, is this in alignment with our pillars, guys? And if it's not, let's not do it, or let's find a way to make it so it is. And so conservation definitely needed to be on there because, between the 4 of us, that's, top of the list. And it's the reason why it's our number 1 pillar, is because we don't want to go in and bulldoze everything and decimate the land and poison the earth and then, try to recover from it. Why not just do it right the first time so you're not fixing the problem later on?
How many standoffs my dad has had with a contractor that wants to take a tree, and he's like, no, but if you just move your line 6 inches to the left, you don't have to take that tree. Or Mitch will get that limbed up. He'll get it limbed up and you'll be able to access that space, no problem. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of doing it. It is, as you said, Rob, kind of almost it's quite corporate almost, in that you have a business principle and that's your lens by which you make every decision. But when using the right principles, like conservation, for example, it can lead to really good stuff, like the keeping the trees, solar power, future hydropower, and things like that. So and obviously, I think that does add to the guest experience. Glamping is about being out in nature, and being surrounded by trees is great, and it's not something that everyone is used to. So I think it's a win on all fronts. You're obviously able to kind of tell that story in your marketing, on your website, and everything like that. I'm always interested in knowing how glamping sites market their business. It's a huge part of it, and it's maybe not something that everyone considers going into it. So we'll go into your kind of wider marketing strategy in a second, but I do want to dig into the launch party that you had. You mentioned it a couple of times. I'm sure it wasn't, a raucous kind of 100,000 people in a field kind of thing, but I'd be interested in knowing, what you did for the launch party, if there's anything that you learned from it that maybe the listeners could apply if they were to do one, and then, what kind of impact it had on the business as well.
I thought we did it well.
Yeah, I
thought we did it right.
Our launch party was really it was almost like a soft launch because we were still only open 3 days a week over this last summer.
Yeah.
But we were actually like, like, okay, well, I guess we're going to start taking reservations on this date. And then we all kind of looked at each other. We're like, okay, well, we need a little bit more fanfare than that. And no one on the team is like really big into like self-marketing or like wanting to be like, look how great we are. Like, look at this amazing project. So we all kind of like cut our gums and being like, should we do it? Should we not do it? What are we going to do?
Will anybody come? What if everybody comes? Like, what if nobody comes? Like,
it was a pretty funny meeting. It lasted way too long about, like, do we charge admission? Do we not charge admission? Do we do this? Do we invite these people? Do we not? And it really was like something where we're like, we've had such a great support from our internal community of like, hey, we kind of have this idea. What do you guys think? And every one of, family and friends were like, this is amazing. You should do it. And every time people come out, they're like, this is incredible. Like, it's growing so much. And then people are asking us about it. So we wanted to kind of celebrate the work we've done, but also all of our friends and all of our community that came out. And so, we hired a food truck and we, had mountaintop yoga that everyone came and parked on. We had a local band that we absolutely love, came out and played. And
we had to tell them they were background noise, and that was hilarious. They were used to like
that was hard for them.
Yeah.
And then they weren't background noise at all.
Yeah. We're like, so we gotta actually like, well, we want to be in the tent. Well, we need the tent for like conversation material. So we gotta put you kind of out here. Well, then how is anyone going to hear us? And we're like, well, actually, we don't really want them. Like, this is not a dance party. Like, this is actually like a. And we brought out the materials. So we had poster boards with like upcoming units that weren't built yet. The whole site, the site plan that kind of said, this is where you are in the 400 acres. Our invite list was something that was really kind of interesting to come up with. So we said all the neighbors for sure. Like,
they were the first.
Yeah.
They were the first to invite. We wanted them to see it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone that was part of like the county that participated, any contractor that did any work on the site, like they were all invited. And then we also went as far as like we invited local law enforcement and the fire department and EMS. So we invited the paper. So anybody in the community that would need to know or would care to understand kind of what this space is like. And
the other thing that we also did is we made sure to invite all of the local hoteliers, everyone that owned a property or any sort of hospitality business in town. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wanted to bring them out because the biggest thing is, we need to, and I've said this from day one, but it's like, high seas make all ships rise. We're not working, in opposition of you guys. We want to show you what we're doing. And we want you to be excited. And the amount of times that folks have, called us or emailed us and been like, hey, are you open or is this happening? And I've been like, no, but there's these great spots in town you should check out. Go to, Backwoods Cabins, go to Art Bliss, go to Hotel Stevenson. There's all these other great places. Granted, we're the only glamping accommodation, but wanting to make sure that that's happening. And then, we've also seen a bit of reciprocation too of people sending folks to us. And, I think building that relationship is really important because this business doesn't have to be cutthroat, and it's not necessary for it to be cutthroat. It's just unnecessary angst.
One of the other things I feel like we should touch on for the launch was like your idea of he always says no one wants to eat in an empty restaurant. No one wants to eat in an empty restaurant. So part of the fear was like, okay, first guy shows up, nobody's camping and nobody's glamping, like nobody's actually here. So we invited our family and, our close friends to come and stay for the weekend. So even though our launch was on, midday Sunday or midday Saturday, it was like, hey, everybody come, we'll provide food, Friday night, and we'll do this, the yoga and the swimming or whatever on the other days. And so people showed up and there were already people there, like enjoying the space, like kids in the log yard, tents up in the campsites, like cars, parked next to the glamping bell tents. So I would say anyone who's interested in doing a launch, I thought that was a stroke of genius to make sure that people were actually glamping on your launch weekend.
I love that. No one wants to eat at an empty restaurant. I think that's a good point. Get your friends and family in there, right? play that social capital card.
Yeah, and then go and touch tables. Like that's the biggest thing. If you're an owner, you're a founder, you're a partner, like every single person that is there you need to talk to. You need to introduce yourself if you know them, if you don't know them, but just make them feel like you're happy they're there, because it did take an effort, and they've got a lot of questions, and you're going to get a lot of questions. And, you know, we got people from the community that were a little bit skeptical, and it's like, I'm going to zero in on you first. I'm going to make you feel so much love, and I'm going to answer every question you have. You're not going to have a choice.
It's a great point. I mean, how many people can relate to being at dinner and the manager or even the owner or the executive chef comes over and just like, hey, how was your meal? You're like, whoa, that was pretty special. He came out to ask us that. So I love that approach. And the reason for inviting the hoteliers, that was just to build relationships with those people. I know you mentioned it was good because you can send each other business, but was that like the reason behind it?
The big reason was that, like, it's a small community and it's a small town, and people have questions, and, you know, and I think just giving them that opportunity, and if they want to know about you and they want to know about your business, invite them. And if they don't, that's okay too. But I think the biggest thing was just being like, hey, this is, you know, like, this is Carolyn, this is Rob, this is my 4-year-old niece, this is Carolyn's daughter. Like, you know, like, we're people, you're people too. Like, you know, this is a family business, and, you know, have that opportunity. You know, and there's a lot of like, hey, how much did this yurt cost? Hey, how much are you going to be offering? Hey, and, you know, you can keep some of your cards close to your chest, but for the most part, like, you want them to feel comfortable with, like, this being something new in the community, because, you know, people do get a little bit insecure about, okay, are they going to take our business? Is this going to happen? And it's like, you know, this is a beautiful place, and we're all here for the same reason. And, like, you have a cabin, I have a yurt. You know, they're very different offerings, and we don't need to be at odds.
We can coexist.
Yeah.
Got it. Love it. And was there anything I know you guys have kind of only done a soft launch. You've only really had a couple months of operation and guest experience under your belt, but how have you guys been getting on the map, getting your name out there so that guests know that you're an option in the market? How's that gone? And is there anything that's been particularly successful?
Donations. We, every single, you know, and I
don't know that we could judge its success, but pretty much anyone that asks us to give, we've given to the Ovarian Society like a couple nights.
We want to support our community, and, you know, realizing that it's a big cause. You know, it's like Carolyn was saying, we've given away a lot of bell tents, a lot of campsites, a lot of yurt stays, you know, for causes that we want to support, and we want to, like, just be out there. I mean, for the most part, like, marketing is hard.
4-H.
Marketing is so hard.
Yeah, we bought a pig and a cow at the 4-H, you know, group. So getting our name out in the local community as far as like, oh, they're donating to, you know, these sorts of youth events or, you know.
Yeah.
And then we also kind of got on the map with, what would it be? I can never remember their acronym.
BDR.
Backcountry
Discovery Route. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's a adventure bike. So, like, motorcycles. It's the Pacific Crest Trail of like enduro biking.
We had no idea.
Yeah, it goes from Mexico all the way up to Canada, and actually, basically the Washington, from Oregon to Washington, like the southern Washington stretch goes right on Bear Creek. And coincidentally, it's something I've ridden my dirt bike on a bunch and had no idea it was actually a thing. But we had some guests staying with us, and they were on the BDR, and we kind of talked, and they're like, dude, you should research this, and you should talk to these folks. So I actually got on the horn with them and talked to them. They were like, oh my God, you guys are right there.
You're right there.
This is perfect. And, you know, and mostly people on the BDR are looking for camping, are looking for more modest accommodations as opposed to a hotel. And so that just worked.
I think there was a biker there when we were there, I'm pretty sure.
It was pretty common over the summer. We would probably once a week have people on bikes coming through.
It's kind of hilarious because that was a demographic we had no idea.
Oh, it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit. It's wonderful. And they're really clean.
Yeah, they ride in.
They ride in at night and they leave early in the morning. But yeah, I would say, Connor, and that, like, to answer that question, like, so I've taken over our marketing, and it is nightmarish. I have no idea how to market, and I wouldn't have thought things like social media and things like digital marketing would be so intense as they are. And for the most part, like, it's hard to sell something that doesn't exist yet, right? And so we haven't taken any reservations for yurts because they're not even fully outfitted. We were only open 3 days a week last summer, so it was really tough to try to push something where it's like, hey, this is going to be great, and I'll let you guys know when you can book it, just not yet, but please continue to follow us.
Well, one thing I would say, I'm not sure what your strategy is for the upcoming spring season, but even if your yurts aren't ready yet, I would 100% be opening up your calendar and pre-booking those units, up to even 3 months in advance. And even in a I'm sure it's likely that you can put in a buffer, but like even if you didn't finish, you could give them some notice and refund the money, and it wouldn't be the worst thing. Obviously, that's not great, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But you guys should definitely be pre-marketing and pre-booking.
Yeah. We've got a guy coming on the podcast. I'm recording with him next week. He's from a company called Secret Garden Glamping, and they're in the UK, and they actually we'll get the full story when we record the episode. But I'm pretty sure he paid for new units without actually ever showing the unit, and then they basically, obviously they built up a following by this point, they were doing well, and they basically did like a mystery unit of, we're going to be building this, you can book to stay in it, and
wow.
They ended up, he didn't even have to pay for the unit in the end. The revenue from the bookings kind of covered the cost. So maybe that's a little bit ambitious, but it does show kind of the as Connor said, the potential of pre-bookings, and it is definitely something, I've seen a lot of people do it successfully. So I'd certainly consider that.
It's an element of risk.
yeah. I wouldn't maybe go as hard as he did, but you can definitely take
that though. They kind of like the risk, like be the first one. And
that's something probably in the next couple weeks we're going to see that we're going to be launching is basically, offering our units for 30%, 40% over market value, to be like, hey, be the first person to stay in this unit, or be the one of the first, this is a limited time, just to kind of start filling up that calendar. And I think the flip side of that is we find that we operate really well when we have a deadline, when it's like, hey, let's try to get this done by this time. We'll be like, oh, the sun's shining today, I think we just got a foot of snow, let's go, and I think just being able to have that, this has to be done by this time, really kind of help us actually accomplish it.
Yeah, so apart from time management skills, you obviously have learned a lot in the process of, and I promise there's a reason why I've segued that. You've obviously learned a lot in the process of starting and building and growing this glamping business. If you were if you had to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch, is there anything you'd do differently or change if you had to start all over again?
I think for me, we kind of touched on it earlier, would just be talking to the community, getting the message out there, controlling the narrative, as opposed to trying to react to someone else's narrative that they've basically put out.
I wish I had a better answer for this. I was feeling like it was something I should be thinking about. And we actually talked to Mitch and my dad a little bit about it. And Mitch said, a bigger crew, please. It's just me. Bigger crew, please. And Dad was like, is there any way we could have done this smaller? Could we have just done 1 year? Did we have to do 4 right out of the gate? And I have thought well, what if we had a better plan to start? If we had, a more concrete, water and sewer plan. But at the same time, without that, we've been able to be really nimble and flexible. And so I guess part of it is perhaps not biting off more than you can chew. And I know people say that probably in every single one is hire a professional. Can I design the water system? Yes. Did I design the water system? Yes. Did it take me 3 years to do it? Yes. Would it have taken someone else 3 months to do it? Yeah. Yes. So I think that's kind of part of it. In plan to invest in planners and engineers. They're expensive, but it's much, much easier to build if you're not building from an idea in your head, because even though the 4 of us work really closely together and we think we understand what the others are talking about, we work, everything goes so much more quickly and smoothly if there is something on paper that everyone can work
Cohesion.
From.
Yeah.
Hey, at least you spent some money on a feasibility study. That's now we know each other.
I heard the same.
Too much money.
That was a huge one. I think
That was
too,
the best choice.
Nick, like the best thing is like this is a good precursor to the next time we're on, you know, because I think once we get a chance to open
The next
and we have a little better understanding of what we would have done differently, because I'm sure this time 6 months from now we're gonna have a much better answer to that question.
Rob's gonna say we didn't end up like the muck boots and the
rain
hard
jackets.
jackets. Like, nah, they didn't fly.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you individually the question we ask every glamping operator. Pretty straightforward. First of all, Carolyn, are you happy with your decision to start a glamping business?
Sure. Yeah.
The last few responses we've had have been really unenthusiastic. It's quite worrying.
It's a marathon, Nick. It's a marathon, and you're asking me at mile 20, like if I'm happy that I ran. If you ask me at mile 20, 3.6, like I will probably have a very different, like, yeah, this is great. But you're asking me at mile 20, so
We'll take sure. That's a 7 out of 10
Yeah.
happiness. Yeah.
am I happy to be on this journey? Absolutely. Like with my family, absolutely. And moving back to the gorge, absolutely. So there's so many of these pieces that are absolutely, but I don't even know if I'm happy that I'm part of a glamping resort yet.
Rob, can we ask you to provide a more positive answer?
Yeah, Nick, I would say let me clean up this mess a little bit.
I can't help it. I'm honest.
No,
We appreciate the honesty. We appreciate the
that's
honesty.
good.
I can't help it.
I would say
I can't
to be
lie.
perfectly honest. So in my phone, I have a folder of photos that I titled the folder "Photos from My Office," and I did that because a year ago, 2 years ago, when I first came out here, going from sitting basically in an office for my entire career to being in the field and working, and even if my office is my laptop sitting on my lap as I like look out over a yurt or something like that, it's so incredibly rewarding to see something you build actually come to fruition and to be a part of something that you like truly, truly believe in, as opposed to working for someone else or doing something else. It has been just rewarding is the best word for it, that every morning I can like get up and I can put my boots on and I can work on building another part of this company and this business that I had no idea that I could do before. And then this few times when we do get to see people out, I mean, like case in point, Connor, like coming and staying with us and hearing what you have to say about something that we've built is it's absolutely magical. And it's like, I couldn't say enough good things about it.
Love it. There we go.
We'll do take two.
I love it. And there's going to be scars, right? I mean, starting like entrepreneurship, small business is hard. And I think, Carolyn speaks to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in it full time. Like I have a full time job.
Yeah, that's true.
This is not my full time job. This is my 8 to midnight job. So
this is your hobby that isn't fun.
Yeah,
you're probably not getting paid for it yet. You just have to spend money.
Yeah. So that's part of my challenge was saying, oh yeah, I'm stoked that I took on all this extra work.
Well, I completely appreciate what you guys are doing. Something that's so close to my childhood home and in a place that I'm very familiar and care a lot about. And you're taking care of, and you have all this stewardship of a 400-acre piece of beautiful land in one of the most stunning areas of Oregon, and you're getting to connect. Washington, right? Sorry, right. And you're connecting people back to that land and to that story, and I think that's a really cool and special thing. So, and the environmental stewardship obviously is close to my own heart as well. So, thank you for all that you do, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. This has been great. We've really been enjoying and just kind of talking and bouncing ideas off each other and our business partners has been a lot of fun.
Definitely, and I'll be back. I'm sure I'll be coming back sometime soon. We're almost getting into kite season, so we'll be off in the gorge. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. We look forward to hearing our episode 2. After you guys get a year of operating on your belt.
We're looking forward to it. Yeah, maybe we'll be tan by then. That'd be pretty sweet.
Can we do this in August next time?
Yeah.
Come stay in a yurt, Connor.
Yeah, Nick too. Also, offers always on the
bucket
table.
list.
We will. All right.
Well, thank you.
Thanks
guys.
so much, everybody. That's a wrap.
Yep.